So welcome to the second 2 days of KVM Forum, which are closer in format to what we have had so far in the previous years. I'm Paolo Bonzini, and I am the KVM maintainer. And I will present what happened in KVM land since the last KVM Forum. This is the overall state. It's more or less the same that we had last year. Last year we dropped IA64. So now we have 6 architectures, all actively maintained. ARM, ARM64, MIPS, PowerPC, x86, and S390. Same user space implementations. QEMU supports all architectures, and KVM tool or LKVM supports all except S390. The last release around this time of the year in 2015 was 4.2. Now we are at 4.8, currently in the release candidate phase. We've had then 6 releases from 4.2 to 4.8, and a lot of commits, also nice looking number. So more than 1,200 commits with some, and we have a new co-maintainer, Radim Kirchmar, which is there. And yeah, so actually we had some pretty big releases. So 4.7, I thought nothing was going on in 4.7 when I sent the pull request. Now I actually made the numbers. It's basically it was the second biggest at the time. And 4.8 is even higher. So we've had some pretty calm releases, but we more than brought back the average to what it used to be. In particular, there was a lot of work on both ARM64 and x86. ARM and ARM64 did a lot of cleanups. We will go later through the highlights for these 6 releases. Contributions are the same as usual: Red Hat, Linaro and ARM, IBM. Basically, everybody is working on their own architecture, doing hardware enablement, especially, and new features, with Red Hat acting as the overall maintainers through me and Radim. And as usual, we have also a very long tail of contributors and companies doing mostly cloud or also selling hypervisors. And so I mentioned 4 there: Google, Kings of Cloud, which is a Chinese cloud provider, Samsung, and Virtuoso. So these are the commits by employer. I'm not counting merges because only I do merges, so that would skew things in favor of Red Hat. And again, it matches pretty closely what was going on with the architectures, except that, of course, PowerPC and S390 are merged together in IBM. You can see that we also had a lot of activity lately on MIPS with Imagination Technologies. And as I said before, we have a lot other people contributing. So other companies are contributing about 15% of the overall commits. For x86, we had VTD posted interrupts. Alex Williamson briefly touched on them yesterday. Epic virtualization used to be Intel only, now it's AMD as well. Nested virtualization is taking a lot of momentum. Recently, we've improved a lot of performance with nested VPID. And lately, we've started working seriously on the security of x86 nested virtualization, thanks, as usual, to Google when it comes to security. And we still don't consider it secure enough to provide an isolation, but at least with respect to the host, you should be safe. It means that you cannot anymore exploit the host, hopefully, by using nested virtualization. Google did fuzzing, and they recently explained on the mailing list the work that they did. And at least this kind of holes should be closed. And we hope that we will have good news by 2017 or whenever. A lot more work on Hyper-V enlightenments. Basically, just one is missing, which is the Hyper-V equivalent of KVM clock. And that's coming too. Split IRQ chip that Steve Rutherford mentioned yesterday. I actually have a much better opinion than him of the patches. I don't think they're hacky at all. I really liked how they came up. And support for huge number of vCPUs, more complete X2 epic virtualization that goes well with the support for virtual IOMMU and virtual interrupter mapping in QEMU. ARM got debug support, got virtualization host extensions, which make it possible to run the kernel at TL2, which means that the kernel, the virtualization extensions in the processor are suited now with ARM v8.1 to KVM, just as well as to type 1 hypervisors. So this provides nice speed up and simplification of the code. Virtual PMU, support for 16K pages, and as I said before, a lot of cleanups, especially in the interrupt controller area. MSI support, so that from the point of view of device assignment and data plane, event, IRQFD, all these features, ARM is now on parity with x86 and PowerPC. Power was probably the least active of the 4 major architectures, but still had some very important performance improvements, especially the ones regarding IOMMU, hypercalls, and dynamic DMA windows. But microthreading also is also important because just like the virtualization host extensions in ARM, the processor moved closer to the KVM model, and these improvements help performance by avoiding some really hacky things that were going on before in Power KVM. S390 has few items, but pretty heavy ones. Guest runtime instrumentation, PCI pass-through through the KVM VFIO device. It's mostly used, I think, for InfiniBand and fiber channel cards on S390. We have nested S390, nested virtualization. I think they only tried KVM on KVM for now, but it's still pretty amazing accomplishment, also because unlike x86, S390 didn't have any shadow paging code, so they had to write the shadow paging for nested virtualization to work. And another feature that is present especially in x86, and to a lesser extent in Power and ARM, but was missing and is still missing in S390, is the CPU model support, where you can fake older CPUs when running on a new host. And they are preparing for that. It will also require some QEMU work, which is also underway. MIPS had really a lot of cleanups, more than 100 patches, basically. It now supports 64-bit hosts, though only for 32-bit guests. And most importantly, it's finally preparing for bringing the hardware virtualization extension patches upstream. And this will also allow running 64 on 64. As usual, we put some work on performance, one patch at a time, one cycle at a time. Optimizing context tracking for, especially for KVM real time, where context tracking is the infrastructure in Linux to handle isolated CPUs that do not that offload their cleanup tasks to other CPUs. Low latency health, which was presented last year at KVM Forum by David Matlack, now is adaptive, so you don't need to turn it on. You can still turn it off if you don't like the extra CPU utilization, but by default, it's turned on. And also another important optimization is the optimized TSC deadline timer, which in some cases can improve VM exits related to the vCPU guest timer interrupts by 30%, bringing them down from 3,000 to 2,000 cycles approximately. There's work going on security. Security is important, especially for as people start using and especially talking more about containers. Virtualization still provides the best isolation compared to containers because it really makes the attack surface smaller at both the guest interface level and the hypervisor interface level. However, we are just not working on improving the security as with master virtualization, but also on security features for the guests. In particularly, secure boot is now upstream in both KVM and QEMU, and also in the firmware in OVMF. And the interesting things that are happening now and are presented or have been or will be presented here at KVM Forum and should be happening in the next few months are kernel hardening with KVM support and the AMD secure encrypted virtualization extensions. As to testing, we've had a good number of commits in the last year. These are not counted in the 1,200 from the first slide. It's a different project. We have added the standalone test infrastructure, which is pretty cool because it allows you to take a snapshot of a test. It makes it much easier for us to ask bug reporters to run a test case, especially if they're running an older version of a kernel and we want to see whether it's been fixed in the meanwhile and just tell them to upgrade. We just send them a shell script, which is basically a shell archive. How many of you have ever heard of shell archives?
Only because I wrote this.
Still counts. And also we've had, last year the highlight was the ARM port of KVM unit tests, and this year we have the PPC64 port with an initial smoke test of the infrastructure. This is the link, and we are looking forward to adding a lot more tests, nested virtualization, KVM clock, and the Hyper-V TSC page, everything else. Just a few words on other kernel projects related to KVM, which are not KVM. Of course, VFIO, we have the anti-feature of the year, no IRMMU mode. We hope that it will go away thanks to virtual IRMMU in QEMU, but for now there's no MMU mode. Intel integrated graphic device assignment, all the stuff that Alex already mentioned yesterday, basically. And mediated device framework will be presented today, and for both vGPU and S390. It's always nice when you have this kind of convergence, gives you a fuzzy feeling of doing things right. Maybe it's true, maybe not, but it sounds good. Virtual vHost got polling support for higher performance networking. Xen support by fixing long-standing debate on how Virtual should do DMA. And we've been working on fixing a lot of latency spikes and improving the performance of KVM-RT. Thank you very much. Looks like I'm just on time, so I invite Stefan and the members of the virtualization developer panel to come here. Thank you very much.